Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Manila House, this is Bambina Wise, your Director of Programming, welcoming you to today's webinar, Blockchain Technology Beyond Cryptocurrency. This is presented in partnership with Asia Society Philippines, Kenja Japan, Curvegrid, and Kobeibrc. Our speakers for today will talk about something that's still very unclear to many of us, blockchain technology. All we're familiar with at this point, I think, is Bitcoin, and to a certain extent, NFTs have become big news. But even, well, I personally don't completely understand what this is all about. So our speakers now are going to explain everything to us. Before we begin, just a few ground rules. This webinar is being recorded and will be up on the Manila House YouTube channel in a day or so. Please use the chat box and the Q&A box for any questions and comments, and we'll get to your questions as we go along. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand and I'll unmute you if the opportunity arises. On the chat box is a link to Slido. You can select some questions from this link if there's something specific you'd like our panel to discuss, or you can also choose whichever questions. We can also see which questions are more popular with others, and we can go to them. So let me introduce our speakers for today. Jeff Wentworth is co-founder of Curvegrid, a blockchain SaaS startup based in Tokyo, Japan. Curvegrid's multi-pass blockchain SaaS platform makes it easy to build, deploy, and scale business applications on one or more blockchain platforms. Previously, Jeff spent 6 years at Goldman Sachs as vice president and global product owner of block and object storage. Prior to that, Jeff was a technology consultant and consumer engineer at EMC. He graduated from the University of Waterloo with a degree in computer engineering. Jonathan Morgan aims to bridge conventional business models with digital transformation by leveraging on emerging technologies such as blockchain and machine learning and partnerships with tech startups. He's an experienced banker and management consultant, and for the past 6 years, supporting more than 9 different organizations across Asia in the area of innovation. Jonathan is an international speaker in corporate innovations, such as for the Stock Exchange of Thailand and Risk.net, at the Asia Risk Congress in Singapore, the FCC in Hong Kong, and a blockchain mentor and judge for the World Blockchain Hackathon in San Francisco. He co-founded Kobe International Blockchain Research Center, or Kobeibrc, in Japan. And he's a board member of Kotani Pay blockchain payment startup in Kenya, as well as the managing director of Blackbird Group, wine company in Singapore. Joining us as reactor is attorney JJ Disini. JJ is one of the leading information and technology law experts in the Philippines today. He has represented local and foreign clients in corporate, project finance, securities, foreign investment, technology, and telecommunications, among others. His areas of expertise are in e-commerce, technology, media, telecommunications, data privacy, data security, fintech, electronic banking, cybercrime litigation, and intellectual property. So, and our moderator for today is Mathieu Labro of Kenja in Tokyo. In fact, if I just point out that our speakers are all based in Tokyo, and Mathieu, as well as Mathieu, and JJ is together with me here in Manila. Mathieu?
Thank you, Bambina. Thank you for welcoming us, and thank you for Manila House for organizing this event. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. Sorry. So we will. This meeting is going to be like 1 hour and 30 minutes. We will have Jess presenting about blockchain technology and with NFT, non-fungible tokens. After this, Jonathan is going to speak about use case for blockchain to give you more like a perspective for enterprise. We will have a 5-minute demonstration on what Kenja can do for blockchain. And after this, we will move to the panel discussion, which will be around 40 minutes. And we will have a Q&A for 15 minutes. So please feel free to use the link I put on the chat box for Slido, where you can ask your question and put the most popular question. You can vote for the question who you think is the best. I will leave Jeff begin with his presentation on the overview of blockchain technology and NFT. Jeff.
Thank you, Matthew. Good evening, everyone. And good afternoon. It's very nice to be here today. Thank you, Bambina, and to Manila House for inviting us and having us. Just before we get started, as Matthew said, there's the Slido link, which is in the chat. It's very, very easy to ask a question. You simply type your question here when this page comes up, and you can either ask it anonymously if you leave the your name field blank, or you can choose to enter your name if you want. Once questions start showing up on this link, you can choose to vote them up or down if you think they're a particularly good question, and we will use this as I think an efficient way to manage the Q&A. So that's the Slido. So yeah, as Bambina mentioned, I am a co-founder of Curvegrid. We're a blockchain software company in Tokyo, Japan. We're entering our 4th year very shortly, and we are focused on making it fast, easy, and cost-effective to build on top of the blockchain. Kenja is one of our strategic partners, and we work together with them on a product that they have, a solution they have called Kenja Rooms, and we're going to show a little bit of a demonstration of that as a practical example of how software can be, and a business software can be integrated with the blockchain a little bit later. But before that, I wanted to spend about 10 to 12 minutes with you talking about blockchain and introducing blockchain. And my background as an engineer, I have to always kind of check myself, because I tend to maybe go a little bit too deep technically. So what we've done here is tried to bring in a very, very kind of real world example, a very timely example, and one that I think is familiar to everybody, in general, and also but fits very, very well with blockchain, and that is art. So for this first part of blockchain beyond cryptocurrency, we're going to be talking about art and blockchain and what that means. So, first, very existential question: what is art? And art can mean many different things to many different people. There's some examples here. Some of these pictures might be familiar with some of you. It doesn't just have to be painting or drawing. It can be music or video or a physical item like a statue. Art means many different things to many people. And another kind of thing to consider when we think about art in the case of a painting is you have the original item, the painting itself. In this case, it's the Mona Lisa, which is of course on display in the Louvre art museum in Paris. But you also have copies of it, right? In fact, what I'm essentially displaying on the screen here, even on the left, it's not the original Mona Lisa. It's a picture of a painting, and then on the right is people taking photos of the Mona Lisa in Paris. And so we have copies, and we have copies of copies, and they can be digital or they can be physical. But it doesn't lessen our appreciation for it at all. If anything, it kind of spreads the word about that piece of art. And I think that's just something to consider as we continue to go through this. And I think it will become evident as to why this is important. So art and the blockchain, some kind of key considerations, right? Really 4 items here to think about, and we're kind of diving right into this, but I will explain in detail as to what all of these mean and how they're connected. The first is provenance, the second is value, then ownership, and what I would term rights. So provenance in general really means, who created the art, who was the painter. In this case, it was, we're fairly certain it was Leonardo da Vinci. Who has owned it? Who has owned it over the 5 or more than 500 years since it was painted? How was it stored or displayed during that time? So we're talking about really the complete history of where this piece of art came from. And all of that ties into the value of that art, right? And so, we have the cost of the materials to make a particular piece of art. In this case, it's the paint and the canvas. And I guess we should add to that, of course, the years and years with which a particular artist practiced their craft and their skill, whether they went to school or apprenticed or, worked and toiled on their own for a particular period of time. And if we consider just the material cost, in the case of the Mona Lisa, I don't know, maybe a few $100s in canvas and paints if it was extremely high quality. If you consider other kinds of art, for example, like a baseball card, I mean, that's a kind of art that is mass manufactured and is maybe, a few cents of ink and paper. But you consider that, baseball cards, I mean, some of those will sell for millions of dollars. A Mickey Mantle rookie card from the 1950s, for example, a $2 million baseball card, which is the materials are just really a few cents. So that's the cost of materials and kind of the cost to produce the art versus its market value or its perceived value of that art. And, there's many famous examples of, kind of a seeming disconnect between the two, I think in both directions. But I think we can probably all agree that one of the key things in that valuing of its art, its market value, is tied to its provenance, right? The artist and the journey the art has been on since it was created. The next is ownership. So who has possession of the art? In the case of the Mona Lisa, it's the French state, I believe, and certainly the Louvre Museum has physical ownership of it. But then there's also ownership of high fidelity or exact copies. So people taking a photo of a piece of art in a museum, or going to the gift shop and purchasing a T-shirt with that art on it. And these are physical drawings or paintings or items like that. We also have to consider, of course, digital art, images, video, sound, or even physical items, right? If a physical item could in fact be copied these days with technology like a 3D printer, right? And so, these are all kind of, considerations. And the last is rights, right? And this has to do with really the legal right to transfer, sell, create a derivative work, commercialize. So not only sell the piece of art itself, but for example, print those T-shirts, as well as earn. And earning in this case means, does the original artist get paid for that art? You might think, well, I've purchased the art at auction, I own it, and the artist got paid. But we already have many examples of this, of course, in the music and film industry, where you may own the rights to a piece of music, but the audio engineer, the publishing house, et cetera, everybody gets a percentage of the royalty payments on that every time a work is performed or played on the radio or on television or streamed on a streaming service, et cetera, right? What we have here in totality, provenance, value, ownership, rights, is a very complex kind of network of how to deal with art, which to date has been dealt with in a very kind of ad hoc, but I would say highly entrenched kind of scheme. And I've described, or schemes, I should say, I've described some of that over the past couple of minutes. So where does blockchain come in? Well, I guess the question is, what is blockchain? And I'm going to try to illustrate more than explain, but blockchain essentially allows us to address each of these in turn and do so in a very organized and cost-effective manner. So let's take a look at a particular artist, case study, if you will, Mike Winkelmann, otherwise known as Beeple. And this is just an excerpt. I think the first paragraph is a Wikipedia entry. You may have heard of him because he's been in the news recently. For the past 13 years, he has been producing a new piece of art every single day. And that ended in early January, where he actually didn't end, but he reached his 5,000th day at that point. And from that produced a collage of all 5,000 images, which is now up for auction at Christie's auction house. And I think there's 2 days left in the auction, and we'll look at that in a minute. But here's a very accomplished artist who has actually quite a large body of work outside of this artwork a day as well, and is now putting this up for auction at Christie's. And there's sort of nothing that's kind of odd about that at first glance, except that it's being auctioned on the blockchain. And so let me explain what that means. So here is an article about it on the Christie's site, and it might be what you expect from any other kind of artwork that's being auctioned. If we look at the entry itself, we can see that the current bid is $5.2 million. And there's I don't know that it says here, it doesn't actually, there's more than, I'm going to try refreshing this, maybe I'll pull that up. There's more than 130 people that have placed bids on this artwork in the past. There we go, 133 bids. The current bid is $5.2 million. The opening bid was $100 US. And you can get a sense of this collage here, which, if we scroll down for the description, is a very large JPEG file, a very large digital image file. That's what's being auctioned, right? So this is the original work that's being auctioned. Why does it have such value? Why are people willing to pay, $5.2 million for a digital image, a JPEG file that you can, store on your computer or your tablet or your phone? Well, the reason is that it's being represented as I'm going to increase the zoom here a little bit. It's being represented as a non-fungible token, or NFT. And what this is, it is a unique digital representation that is being stored on the blockchain. So once this is auctioned and sold, whoever the buyer is will have that token, will have ownership of this non-fungible token, and they will be the owners of this work of art. And whatever rights are basically conferred upon this token, I mean, it acts not only as a representation of ownership, but also of, potentially the contract rights in terms of what you can do with that piece of art. So now Beeple is not the first to do this. This has been going on for, years, I would say, in niche circles, but really it's taken off in the last few months. And I really think it's just the start of it, because as I'll show you, this gives us the ability to do all of those things that have been done in an ad hoc manner on the blockchain. Provenance, value, rights, and I'm going to go back to my notes, provenance, value, rights, and ownership as well. So there's a few things here, right, that I want to call out. We have a token ID, we have a wallet address, we have a smart contract address, and we have this concept of a non-fungible token. So what are these addresses? These addresses are essentially like bank account addresses. And it's represented here in what's called hexadecimal, which is a base 16 numeric system. So we have the digits 0 to 9, and then also A to F. And it's used by computer programmers as a convenient way to represent even larger numbers. So this number would be even larger in terms of if it was decimal from 0 to 9 in just a more compact form, right? So you can think of the wallet address and the smart contract address as being like a bank account address, and a very, very large one at that. And it is so large that on the blockchain, there are essentially more account addresses, more possible account addresses than there are atoms in the planet Earth, which means that we can reliably generate them at random as we need. So let's take a look first at this wallet address, this 0x6cb05. And I'm going to use a website called Etherscan here, which is a website called a block explorer. And this allows us to peer into the blockchain and look at what's going on. So this is the Ethereum blockchain, which is a public blockchain. It means anybody can look at this. And this wallet address is Beeple's wallet. So we are looking at his public address. Now, the address is essentially anonymous until either somebody figures it out or somebody tags it here on this website, but it is otherwise anonymous. But this is Beeple's address. He has close to $300,000 US in Ether, which is the base cryptocurrency of the Ethereum blockchain, and $362,000 in what are called tokens. And tokens come in various shapes and forms, but essentially represent either a fungible asset like a currency or a stock or bolts in a drawer in a warehouse, or a non-fungible asset, essentially something that has a serial number. So that's what a non-fungible token is. It means there is a finite, non-divisible number of them. In this case, this artwork. So within his wallet, one of these tokens, he's actually holding that item. And I'm going to take a guess. I think this is it. I could be wrong. Transaction hash. Where are we? 21 days ago, this was created. Let's take a look at this transaction hash. So he actually created this item, this maker token, OBO create digital media and releases. This was the kind of low-level function that he called if you were a software engineer. But essentially what this means that he paid a transaction fee of $133 and created this token. and linked it to this image file. So we'll come back to the image file here. That was his wallet address. Now we're going to look at what's called the smart contract address. And a smart contract, despite its name, is not a legal contract. Instead, it is a computer program that runs on the blockchain. So you have computer programs that run on your mobile phone or on your laptop or in the cloud, in a Google Cloud or an Amazon Cloud, AWS. You also have computer programs that run on the blockchain, and that's what a smart contract is. So we're going to take a look at this smart contract, again, in hexadecimal, 0x2A46. I have that open here. This is the maker's token smart contract. And again, we're looking at this in the Block Explorer. It's all public. We can come in here and we can see the computer source code for it. If we wanted to audit it ourselves and take a look at it, we can also interact with it here by essentially calling these smart contract functions. And so, there's one particular, I'm going to make this even a little bit bigger. There's one particular of interest here, which is called token URI or token URL. It's another way to say URL. And I'm going to enter this token ID 40913. And when I click this query button, it pulls up this IPFS or interplanetary file system link. And when I open this, I get another digital representation of what this token is, right? So I have my my preview media file, my raw media file. I have a description of it, and if I look at if I open that preview media file link, I in fact get the picture. And if I open the raw media file, I get that picture as well. Now, what does all this mean? First of all, something you've noticed is that it's this complete transparency, right? So there is no question about the fact that Beeple in this video, in this listing on Christie's, on his website, on his Twitter account, he is saying, this is my wallet address. I am this artist. I am issuing these tokens and these items, and this is the complete provenance of this. And through a website like Etherscan, we can see the complete provenance and history of these items. We can make a judgment about what it might be worth to us. And once it is transferred, right? Once this auction is completed and it's transferred, the new owner of this token will be able to, in fact, sell it again or transfer it again, and that history will be forever present there. So this is another Beeple work which was sold, was created 3 months ago, was transferred or sold 5 days ago for 139 ether, so roughly $20,000. And when we can see that trading history. So I'm going to pause there. I'm sure some of you, this might be very familiar for you. Some of you may have many questions, which would be happy to get into the Q&A. And I'm shortly going to pass it over to Jonathan, who is going to take you through a much more practical set of use cases. And not that art is not practical, but let's say a business and other sorts of use cases. So thank you. I'm going to pause there, and I will hand it over to Jonathan.
Thanks, Jeff. Hang on, let me quickly share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, hi everyone. Thanks, Jeff. That's very informative, even for myself. It's very interesting. Just a bit about Kobe International Blockchain Research Center. We're based in Japan, and our focus is a lot in blockchain R&D, research and development, to basically help the society, businesses, as well as people like users like us, to understand how blockchain can impact our lives, as well as our businesses, if we are doing cross-border kind of businesses, and so on and so forth. So we partner a lot with startup ecosystem within Japan as well as worldwide. So I'll deep dive into the deck that I have it will be more of taking a step back to understand blockchain as a whole, because presumably some of us are just a beginner probably in this topic, but some of us may have already deep dive into it. Okay, so just to help everyone on the same page, I'll just share why do we actually need to learn about blockchain, right? Because each and every one of us individuals, we basically are impacted with this technology, whether it's in the area of supply chain, like raw materials, products and goods, when we do certain online purchases, whether we want to know the origin of it, the legitimacy of it, and even banking and services, right? This is part and parcel of our daily life. And not necessarily if we are investing in a cryptocurrencies or in a business, it only affects us, not really, okay? The big picture, as Jeff has already mentioned and show you a glimpse of how blockchain actually looks like. I think it's very informative because a lot of people know about blockchain, but they don't really see, okay, how does it actually look like from a user interface point of view? Because it's common that you can see this once you Google it, you will know what blockchain is about, that the type of cryptography, the consensus mechanism around it, but you don't really see how it actually looks like. So the big picture, to get everyone on the same page, blockchain is basically not Bitcoin. Okay, I think that is the understanding that we have to establish. It is a type of distributed ledger technology. So Bitcoin is a type of blockchain. Ethereum is another type of blockchain. So blockchain is governed by consensus network. There's both private as well as public blockchain, and even hybrid, right, for the consortiums. It is a type of distributed ledger where you can share data on a distributed network, and is governed by cryptography. I will not go into the details of this. Okay, various type of blockchains like Bitcoin, Ethereum, these are public blockchains. There's Neo, Sinfin, Hyperledger, and R3 are where a lot of banks, Visa, Mastercard, people, these corporations are using Hyperledger and R3 to basically develop their own product in specific use cases. I'll deep dive into the use cases later. Yeah. Now, our understanding or some of the questions that we have is blockchain is still in proof of concept, or there's a lot of implementation already happening in the industry? I want to share the Deloitte global blockchain survey that was done for last year. I know the image is a bit blurry, but this will give, I will just focus on some of the information. Deloitte has done a survey for 14 countries for about approximately 1,500 respondents. If you see the gray one over here, in 2019, out of these respondents, 23% have cited that they have brought blockchain into production. We're not talking about proof of concepts anymore, okay? That is in 2019. For last year, an overall 39% have mentioned they have brought blockchain into production. And out of these total respondents, 41% have started generating revenue for more than $100 million US dollars. And 46% of them is generating more than $1 billion US dollars. So while it's just a couple of years ago that we understand blockchain is classified as a technology experiment. It's a lot of proof of concept. It's far beyond maturity for implementation. But today, we are talking about blockchain technologies is affecting entire organizations or even businesses. And I will share with you some of the use case. So based on a lot of events that I've been invited to give examples, a lot of people come up to me to ask questions. Okay, which particular space that blockchain is predominantly being making a difference? So the highest adoption rate, and I would say it from the perspective of our research, yeah, and you will see different kinds of perception if you deep dive into CB Insights or different kinds of organizations' research paper. The highest adoption rate are in this area: pharmaceuticals, energy, natural resources, high value goods, transportation, and utilities. Pharmaceuticals are drugs, medications, and even for COVID vaccinations. Okay, right now they're also using blockchain because one of the key challenge is identify how many vaccines there is, as well as where is it being distributed. Okay, The industry that is gaining speed are banking, insurance, stock market, professional advisory. These are more complex kind of corporations. Banking, more often than not, most banks have similar challenges because they have years of systems, legacy systems. Some of them have 80 to 90 different kinds of system that they need to integrate. So they're a bit slower in that perspective. And to add on to that, I spent more than 10 years in working with different kinds of banks, international banks, hands-on, very hands-on, specializing in risk management. And on top of that, 6 years in PwC Consulting as a risk advisory. And I've advised more than 9 different organizations. Across this experience, I've seen banks that wants to adopt different kinds of emerging technology, but it's because of legacy systems that becomes one of the biggest challenge in terms of integrating their data lakes into technology. Okay, but having said that, specific areas in large corporations are gaining speed. Okay, but the current challenges that everyone face are technology and scalability, basically for both blockchain technology as well as their in-house systems. Interoperability is more of a blockchain, whether they are using Corda from R3 or a Hyperledger Fabric from IBM. How does the blockchain talk to each other and sharing of data? That is one of the key challenges as well. And the other aspect is legal and regulatory. In Singapore, as well as Malaysia, the regulators are taking a bit of a lax kind of approach, because I think they realize that if they go too much, if they start with a lot of controls, then they would hinder innovation, right? And I think the regulators agree that they need to allow blockchain to mature and evolve as we speak. So, but having said that, there are certain precedents as well, framework that the regulators come up with that starts to give more, I would say, kind of a additional challenges for startups to find a way to meet these requirements. Governance is also another current challenges. So I've picked these 6 use cases here, right? These are highly impacting us as users, like insurance and airlines. Logistic and supply chain is one area that some of them missing. Okay, how does logistic and supply chain impact us? Well, we do groceries, right? We are carnivores, we eat meat, we're buying fruits. How do we know that when we buy from a certain origin, they actually come from there, right? And not the importers are getting these raw materials from some other place. So indirectly, the supply chain will impact us, and we want to be able to know the goods that we are paying for is coming from a legitimate country. So blockchain improved traceability, transparency from this perspective using smart contract. Jeff has showed you an example of how the code looks like on a smart contract basis. And smart contract is basically a digital contract or agreement that is being executed automatically when the terms are being met. Okay, now bring you to insurance and airlines. Of course, now with COVID, basically we can't really travel. But this is an example where if there's a flight delay or due to, for example, pandemic, but we have purchased a specific ticket and it's covered by the insurance, all these terms in the insurance, I mean, the first question is how often do we know what is covered under the insurance when we pay the $20 or $25 when we fly? But with smart contract, all these are kicked in automatically. If there's a flight delay, if there's a cancellation, we get the benefits automatically without us even need to report ourselves or go and deep dive into what am I covered and raise a report. So that's the beauty of blockchain. Some of us have the hobby of collecting gemstones like diamonds. And if you know, most of these diamonds, authentic ones, they come with a report called GIA report. So all these are paper-based, and all these certifications can be fraudulent. Okay, so what blockchain does is able to store and authenticate the legitimacy of diamond, where each diamond is unique on its own, has a serial number to it. So this is one area that that blockchain is heavily being is making a difference. Trade surplus renewable energy is one area. There's a marketplace where if you have clean energy, solar power, you can decide how much you want to charge and sell this renewable energy, and all this will be captured via blockchain. Medical reports. To give you an example, is that if you have a medical conditions, touch wood, or you go to a hospital and so on, in today most of us are covered by insurance. But how do we know? The manual process is that we have to make payment, make a claim, submit all the documentations for the insurance company to track. But I mean, my name and IC, identification card, is all over the place, right? So what blockchain does is it's able to integrate this information via a permission kind of blockchain, that the insurance, for example, AIA, AXA, or Prudential, whatever, they are able to instantaneously see the medical history, the payments that we have done in a hospital and so on the same blockchain, if they have the partnerships with the hospital and the clinics. And you no longer need to submit your documentation and claim and so on and so forth, because the information is transparent on the blockchain. So this is one aspect, as well as ticketing in terms of music, entertainment, events. There are a lot of sale and purchase of event tickets, but more often than not, there are fraudulent tickets as well. Tickets are being sold in a secondary market, in a third market, and so on. And usually you have to pay 3 times or 4 times, right? Like football tickets or a specific celebrity. So to control that, to promote and facilitate fair deals, we use blockchain to track this. These are some of the examples. There's more than that, okay? The next slide we will see is, why is it then blockchain right now from a larger scale? How does it impact us as well as the industry, besides these few use cases? What others are doing? One of the major challenge today is that, and this news comes from the Interpol, that there are around 1 million people die each year from counterfeit drugs, that 50% of pharmaceutical products sold through rogue websites are considered fake. There's side effect, people die from that. Every year, about 1 million people die from this. 30% of it is sold in emerging markets. They are counterfeit. So right now, DHL and Accenture, what they're doing is they are building this blockchain tool that could track the manufacturer of these pharmaceutical products, and how is it being packaged, warehoused, transported until it reach a specific merchant, right? So there's traceability that will be able to help consumers like us to identify whether a product is legitimate or not. This blockchain project has potentially life-saving implications, regardless of whether we are business owners, investors, or whether we are interested in the blockchain or not, right? This has an immediate impact to our life. The next one, decade-old myth. So this come out in the news in CNN in year 2014. In China, the China custom official seized more than 100,000 tons of frozen meat. These frozen meats are dated year 1970s. And because of the scientists, they noticed that the meat are being frozen, thawed, right? And there's no signs of whether it's fresh or not. So, but technically they are dated 30 years ago. And this has affected food chains like McDonald's, Starbucks, KFC, Papa John, Burger King, Pizza Hut. These chains that we know, and is basically our family restaurants, basically, right? So this impacts us indirectly as well, okay? And Walmart, IBM, JD.com, Tsinghua University, they come together to build this blockchain that could that has a life-saving impact, and that will benefit all of us. Basically, to trace where is the from the animals being slaughtered, right from the beginning, to how the meat is being processed, how long is it being kept, the serial number of it, how is it being distributed, whether it's in the right temperature or not, whether it has passed the expiry date until it reached the retailer. there's a combination of the blockchain technology being integrated with Internet of Things, IoT, right? So this is one of the area that is highly impactful for ourselves. And this meats is not only in China that we question their integrity, but even in Ireland, there's horse meat scandal as well, where the Food Safety Authority found there's horse DNA in 1/3 of the beef burgers that are being sold in supermarkets. So all this came out in the news, in CNN as well, and so on and so forth. I can share the links in Forbes if you would like to know more. Last but not least, I know I run out of time. One of the key areas is, as well as this is in Africa. I share this because, okay, this is a bit of a bias. I sit on the board of Kotani Pay, but what they do is something very remarkable. There's 1.3 billion population in Africa. 770 million of them are mobile subscribers, right? And 57% of them are basically subscribers using featured phone. Some of you would have known this. You use the old Motorola big phone, Nokia 3366, those huge ones that you only use SMS. Without internet connectivity and without a bank account, you are able to receive salary, you're able to transfer funds without internet connection. I think this is something very remarkable. And this will change the life of the farmers at rural areas that in those days they pay hefty fees and so on to middlemen as well as financial intermediaries. But now with blockchain technology, we are moving from the business terms of point A to point B using just SMS. You will have a secure wallet, use the blockchain platform and smart contract to access financial facilities. This is a game changer that affects life. And not just Kotani Pay, but BanQ as well, that have products on those. But I do not have affiliate with BanQ, or I do not sit on their board. There are multiple startups that are doing it. Avisla is one of them as well. Please check it out. That's and last but not least, banks. I think banks, you have heard a lot that they have a lot of use case in trade finance, in cross-border payments, and so on and so forth. And this is not new anymore. And this is more or less kind of mature, but is improvised as we speak, right, in the collaboration of blockchain. So that's all I have for the use case. Thank you very much. I'll hand it over to Mathieu.
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. Really interesting. And Jeff also was really interesting about the NFT. We are going to move to a demonstration from Jeff regarding Kenja and how we blockchain work in Kenja.
Thank you, Matthew. So very, very quick 5-minute demonstration of Kenja. So Kenja Rooms, for those who aren't familiar, is a document management, task management platform. The whole concept behind it is that it's as easy to use as a website, right? We don't have to think about an application or installing anything. It's just as easy to use as a website. And so here's the interface for a Kenja Room. What we have here is different cards, which represent different rooms. So I can go into, for example, the certification tracking room, and I can see I have rooms or sub-rooms within rooms here. This is for organizing my documentation, for example. The rooms themselves are represented by QR codes, which could represent a kind of a proof about that room, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I'm going to go into the food producer room here, and this is tying back to something that Jonathan talked about around the provenance or the history of meat and its certification. Within this Kenja room, I have these different tiles, and each tile represents one or more documents. In this case, I have a certificate that's been issued here on the left. I have information on the producer, the farmer, Mr. Carlson here, along with his authorization. And then I actually have a picture on the right of the fruit that has been stored. And I can see some other images of the fruit here. Now, all of this can very easily get wrapped up into essentially an immutable, so an unchangeable representation on the blockchain, right? So what I have now clicked in here is what's called a published room. So this is being turned into basically just a website, a static website, where I can see a static but interactive website where I can see the checklist here around authenticity of the documents. We've received the employee ID. The certification through next year has been updated, as well as all of the content as well. Now, what is possible for me to do with all of this information is essentially to wrap it up and take a fingerprint of it, what's called a hash. So a hash in this case means a fingerprint. It's a mathematical process which takes all of this information together and runs it through a one-way mathematical algorithm and gives me a shortened version of it, representation of it. So I'm going to say, yes, all of these tasks have been completed. I'm now going to hash it onto the blockchain. The hash is now being verified, so it's been hashed onto the blockchain. And I can actually click this again and see this hash here, right? So here's this hexadecimal representation again, B534FD, etc. I can copy this and I can store this along with this information. And what it would allow me to do is in the future, anybody could come with this same set of certificates and photos and say, yes, this farmer had this certificate, these photos of these mangoes, this fruit on this date and time. And these documents did in fact exist in the state. And we can also verify that through a third-party website like Etherscan, which we've seen here in the past, right? And so, we can come here and we can indeed check. And of course, this is a generic website, so it doesn't give us kind of the same nice user interface that Kenja does. But if we go back to Kenja here and we take a look at the hash verified, B534, B534FD, etc., we would be able to verify that, yes, that hash is in fact there on the blockchain for all time. So that is a very, very fast overview of what that looks like within Kenja Rooms. If you'd like more information, you can feel free to reach out to myself or Matthew. So I think we're going to pause there and we'll hand it back to Matthew to transition to the next part of our program.
Yes. Thank you very much. So Kenja can offer like a lot of opportunities and he's trying to offer a visual version of what blockchain is about, which is sometimes not easy to understand, as you could see on some of the technical things Jeff explained. Let's move to a more panelist version where we are going to have a discussion. And I would like to start with JJ, because JJ didn't speak at all almost tonight. So JJ, I would like to have your view on how regulation and law is in Philippines for blockchain and cryptocurrency at the moment.
Okay, so thank you for having me here today. So I started in this space sometime in 2015. Back then, there was one item in the Banco Central website, which in summary it said about Bitcoin: be afraid, be very, very afraid. Essentially, they said, Bitcoin. They actually said a lot of things about Bitcoin, and they said, it's not as good as fiat. And I had slides before that if you went by them one by one, it actually, they said, for example, they said, oh, Bitcoin isn't backed by anything. Then I was thinking, well, no, neither is fiat. So they were warning people about blockchain when in fact fiat was on the same level. But since then, it was actually quite startling how the Banco Central sort of went 180, took a 180 turn and started supporting virtual currencies. And in fact, back then, I remember in 2015, what I was proposing was don't regulate blockchain until or Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies until the cryptocurrency hits the real economy. In other words, at the point where somebody wants to exchange crypto for fiat, that seems to be the most logical point at which regulation can happen. And indeed, that was the first type of regulation that we had. The BSP started licensing what's known as virtual currency exchange operators. And the first one that got a license is coins.ph. And then subsequently, a bunch of companies, and now there are a number of them. And it's to the point now where there's even a BSP regulated virtual currency exchange operator that you can buy Bitcoin at a mall, at various pawn shops in malls, and these are regulated. It's called Moneybees. And then there are all these virtual currency exchanges. There's now one where you can even trade, and that's called PDAX, Philippine Digital Asset Exchange. And of course, coins, you can buy on coins. I believe Union Bank also maintains an ATM at their main branch where you can put cash in, I think, buy Bitcoin there. So the regulator has been very supportive. And as a result, there are a number of cryptocurrency companies here, a lot of foreign ones as well. I believe Abra is here. Binance has a local representative, etc. So it's very accommodating at this point, and it should be interesting now, because what happened is that there seems to be a disconnect in terms of regulation, because as you know, some regulators in the US say that cryptocurrency isn't currency, but they are securities. And if it's security, it is regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. And so some parts of crypto, although the SEC has not issued any rules locally yet, they've submitted rules for comment. But so in order to close the gap, the government, or I think it was announced last week, the Banco Central and the SEC have signed an agreement that they will cooperate in sort of a unified regulation over this space. And I think they're saying that for the rest of fintech, where, okay, they're letting everyone innovate, and depending on what the sort of joint body will say, you either go to the SEC or you go to the BSP. So it's actually looking quite good for cryptocurrency in the Philippines.
Okay, really interesting also. But like you were speaking more on the enterprise, but how is it for like individual to own cryptocurrency, or like there is anything recommendation you have for them regarding this in Philippines specifically?
Okay, interesting. There's no restriction. I mean, you can hold cryptocurrency. There's no regulations on things like wallets. I guess I would say what everybody else would say. The safest place to hold your crypto is in a cold wallet, right? A hardware wallet, right? Don't leave it on an exchange so it doesn't get hacked. But there's no, well, here's an interesting thing, right? There are no specific sort of cryptocurrency laws yet when it comes to taxation.
Yeah.
So currently, right now, you buy crypto and there's a gain. I think I was talking to a tax lawyer the other day. He said that you can treat it as a capital asset. So he says that if you're holding the crypto you can demonstrate you held the crypto for more than, I think, 3 years, the tax rate is something like 17% or something. So it's actually not that bad, right? So you can you can ride the bull run. But it depends on how long you've held on to the asset. Otherwise, there's a larger capital gains tax. But I'm sure. So I'm not a tax lawyer, but I'm sure there's a tax lawyer out there that will be more than happy to guide you through that web.
Not a tax lawyer as well, but to add on to that, Singapore, if you have capital gain tax, is not taxable in Singapore, so you can invest in Singapore.
Yeah. Okay. The problem is that a Filipino is taxed from income all over the world. So there has to be a way, right?
Jeff, I have a question for you regarding like the NFT. You were speaking about NFT, and so how this was enabled, and what kind of change do you see? Like which industry would be impacted by this?
Yeah, it's a great question. So art, right, of course, is the example that we used. And I think what we're going to see is not only for digital art, but to represent physical art as well. Similar to the way that you have an ownership certificate or a provenance certificate for a physical piece of art, there's no reason that couldn't be represented by a token on a blockchain, which opens up all sorts of interesting possibilities, where maybe the physical art is in a museum or stored somewhere in your vault, but the ownership of it can change and move much more fluidly. And by extension, that can apply to anything, right? It could apply to ownership of a car. It could apply to ownership of a house or property or real estate. So I think those are some of the industries where we're going to see it move to next. Real estate, I think we're going to see it in the manufacturing and trade space as well. If we're talking about, a shipping container could be represented by a non-fungible token, or the items within the shipping container could be represented by an NFT or non-fungible token. So I think that's where we'll see it go next.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So JJ, what do you think regarding this and the law and the regulation? Again, sorry, but
Right.
like these have a lot of implication now regarding law.
So I think so. Let me see. I think about I'm trying to think now. Maybe about 2 years ago. I think 2 years ago, somebody asked me about, what if I go and buy condominiums in the Philippines, and so I put it under some sort of vehicle, and then I say I will tokenize the rental income, right? So I will do a token offering. And so if it's let's say it's 100 tokens, and so one token is 1% of the net income, and you drive all the income, and then you distribute the income via and the question was whether or not that was regulated. Now, what will happen in a situation like that is the SEC is going to say, well, that kind of looks like a real estate investment trust, or maybe it's some sort of offering, and then there will be some regulation that will happen on top of that. I think the promise of NFTs is it is really, there's this one-to-one correspondence between sort of the piece of property and the work. So there was an interesting going back to art. There was I think it was the other day. There's this artist named Banksy, and so what they did was he said, "Here's the art, and then what we're going to do is we're going to burn the original." So they burned the original, and then they said this non-existent original is now entirely in digital form. And then I don't know, I'm sure it's going to go through the rounds, right? But knowing Banksy, the problem is that when you end up buying the NFT, it might I don't know, explode, right? It turns out it's just a big prank. It's not really an NFT. No, but kidding aside, I think what's interesting, I think from an intellectual property. So I was thinking about this, it wasn't until when Jeff was talking earlier that it occurred to me, because I was really wondering, like, what's the value? I mean, NFTs are going for millions of dollars. And then it occurred to me that, one of the weaknesses in the intellectual property system, particularly in copyright, is that sometimes you don't even know who owns a copyright. And then even if you knew who owns a copyright, you don't know if that person had given a license, because he's not under any obligation to register the licensing. But if you issued the intellectual property right as an NFT, you could sell tokens that represent licenses. And if you are a holder of that token, that means you have a license to use that work. And that token could be, say, it could be a fungible, something that you spend when you use the license, or it could be an NFT that you keep passing on to every person. Therefore, what that means is that if I can link a license to a unique NFT, that means that anybody who uses that NFT, that my work, right, my intellectual property, who is not in a possession of a token that I issued, that person is guilty of copyright infringement. And because copyright infringement is more or less, uniform across, the WIPO world, as it were, right? All countries who adhere to WIPO or the Berne Convention. There's a very good chance that you could sort of say that the only form of license I issue is this license, and you could probably sue people for infringement. So this is a reason now to think that a non-fungible token, right, can have a great value, because it also is a mode of control, right? You can actually run after everyone who's exploiting that work without your consent.
Yeah, and I think just building on what JJ said, I mean, fascinating kind of analysis there. I think that from we're often in the technology side of things. Think, oh, look at all this great technology, and it's so complex, but really it's a tool. It's a toolkit, right? It's a new kind of toolkit. I mean, we have paper contracts or PDFs and e-signatures. Right. Now we have blockchain. It's another tool in many different industries to allow us to do things faster, easier, and cheaper. And one thing I didn't actually show was if you click on the place bid button on the Christie's website, it pops up. You can actually bid for $5 million, and it shows you the cost, the buyer's premium, which means the cost that the bidder would pay to the auction house, and it's currently 20%, so $1 million of fees. right, for a digital item. And you have to applaud Christie's for getting ahead of this, because when you're dealing with blockchain, the cost that you pay is the incremental cost to secure the system. So it's like we're all chipping in to essentially secure this common shared infrastructure, which is the blockchain itself, the computation on the blockchain. So minting a token, as we saw in the past, costs something like $30. It's a fairly complex operation. And then transferring a token might cost somewhere between, you know, $10 to $30. That's the fee that you'd pay, not $1 million. So if you're operating a website that's not Christie's, but another a venue for auctioning this kind of art, and it could be, you know, a story that you've got copyright over that your child wrote in grade 1 and you're sending it to their grandparents or something like that, you know, kind of for fun almost, or it could be, you know, something from an up and coming artist or a really famous author. You know, you will always pay that same incremental amount. And so the question, I think, for venues like Christie's is, you know, how are they going to change their business model to be able to compete, right? When the provenance is there on the blockchain, we know who made it. We know who owned it, you know. So I don't know, JJ, have you gotten into that at all in some of what you've been looking at? Oh, please go ahead.
So it's interesting you said that, because you're right. They it's like they disrupted themselves and they have no idea, right? They basically demonstrated to everyone, you don't need us, because everything you need is on the blockchain. And that's what auction houses are good for. They're good for provenance, right? So if you sell disputably, you know, whether or not that's a Da Vinci for $500 million, it turns out it's not a real Da Vinci, and so it can't be exhibited, right? So there was that sold to some, I think somebody from the Middle East, right? But you don't need them anymore because the blockchain is the provenance. And I think, so that's, I'm sorry, I was just fascinated by that they had no idea they were walking into a trap. So it's like, I don't know, it's like, I guess, what's that, Tower Records, right? Selling MP3s, like not knowing that it's the end of CDs. So the irony is quite fascinating. So I was really, when you were speaking earlier, I had this idea some time back, where, you know, if you want to turn something into an NFT or crypto, would be personal information, right? So every day we're giving out personal information on Facebook, on right, we're posting stuff. Now imagine if every piece of information on Facebook is an NFT, and then you basically say, you want to use my NFT, bid for it, right? Now obviously I can't manage all my personal information, right? So what I do is I appoint an intermediary. So there are these companies you call like privacy agents, and you choose one, right? So there's a privacy agent who says, I can get you a lot of money, but you're going to lose your privacy because I'm going to sell this to whoever is the highest bidder. And then there could be a privacy agency that says, you know, I'm going to protect your privacy. I'm going to only choose the best ones, the good guys who are not going to exploit your data. You're never going to see it on the dark web, etc. And you set up this system where you can't use my NFT until you can prove that somehow I gave this token, right? So I'm saying NFTs have this capability of even protecting what some people consider to be a fundamental right, which is the right to privacy. And I think that would be sort of a great ecosystem that can happen and can solve all these problems with like GDPR and trying to comply with all these privacy laws around the world. You have this layer of contracts, right? Smart contracts that sort of enforce your rights, but then have people as well to provide sort of different shades of you know, I guess preferences that people have with respect to their property, and data is your property. And so to a certain extent you can say, you know, there was a statistic, I couldn't believe this, but there's a statistic out there that says that Filipinos on average spend, that's unbelievable, it's like 8 hours a day on social media. And so which makes me wonder, because I do have people working for me in the firm, like how much of them are actually working, because they're spending 8 hours, right? Some of that must be in the office. But what that tells you is that Filipinos at 8 hours a day are working for Facebook for 8 hours a day, and they're not getting paid, right? They're getting paid in the sense that the service is free. But if Facebook is turning around and making billions of that sort of input, if somehow some of that money, Facebook is willing to say, look, we'll pay you, we'll resell at a higher price, but we'll pay you, then people get compensated. And maybe that kind of future NFTs and crypto can make happen as you commoditize sort of different things that currently we don't commoditize. Things like CPU, right, usage or hard drive space. My hard drive is just here. It's not doing anything, but it's connected to the network. So if I can sell hard drive space, right? So it's really it's a fantastic thing. There's so many things that can happen when it comes to crypto and blockchain.
Yeah, I'm going to move a little bit from individual and go back to enterprise. Jonathan, because you saw like the adoption and you see like how trends are going, you know, what do you think like is happening? Like what is the big trend in blockchain and cryptocurrency? Like because we see like companies like Tesla or PayPal or you know, accepting cryptocurrency. So what's the meaning of this? What do you see in your side?
I think there are a lot of aspects to see, but one of the key prominent one is that if a couple of years ago we said that part of our investment portfolio is cryptocurrencies, people will say, no, get out of it, it's a scam, you know. But today I think we have to acknowledge that the shift to digital form of currency is inevitable. So we are in need, and with Tesla receiving accepting Bitcoin as a form of payments when you purchase their cars, or even PwC for their services, I think that is the future. You know, we are in it right now, and there will be the future. And I think it will be a good thing for us to even start now to have a form of our investment portfolio to have some form of cryptocurrencies.
Of course, no investment.
Yeah, I mean, look at the clear advantage. It mainly for the clear advantages in terms of accessibility, efficiency, speed, in terms of funds transfer, security, and for example, ability of government to disperse funds to the citizens, right, during the pandemic. So these are just some of the key aspect why there are a lot of enterprise or corporations, even governments, are looking at digital form of currencies.
Can I ask a question more on a practical level? Like you guys are all, well, Jonathan, Matthew, and Jeff, you're heavily, or maybe JJ as well, heavily involved in blockchain, you know, it's part of your business and all that. That's a platform you use. Do you get paid as like part of your salary in crypto? And do you regularly exchange it for a legal tender or whatever as your needs arise? You pay for your rent, for example, using crypto. I mean, how does it, you know, how do you use it in your everyday life?
Me, I can tell you, like, I was hired by Bitflyer in Japan, and they pay like 20% of your salary on cryptocurrency. So you can choose the cryptocurrency you want. It's an exchange. And after this, it's up to you to decide what you do with it. Me, I decide to hold it because I think the value will go up. But yes, you can still pay things with it. Like there are services on the internet to do this. Jonathan or Jeff, do you have any view on this?
For myself, I'm not being paid in crypto, but I invest in some of them, as well as for Kotane Pay, as I sit on the board. We basically use tokens as a means of funds transfer, right? And mainly you use CUSD, is a type of tokens on Kotane Pay, integrated with Silo, that you transfer funds across a country from, say, there's a, for example, helper in US that wants to transfer back to Philippines or Africa. They basically use US dollar to buy tokens and transfer it, and whoever that receives the funds, they'll be able to cash out in their local currencies, which they can choose either to get it in a CUSD, the token, or in their local fiat currency. So it's more of a means of channel of funds transfer. Yeah, and I do it personally for investment purposes.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some of our staff have recently been interested in being paid in cryptocurrency, and it's something that we're looking at now. There's no law in Japan that prevents us from doing that. In fact, you know, the law here is interesting. You know, I think first of all, similar to the Philippines, very well regulated in Japan. I mean that in a positive way, like very clear rules. Maybe what's a little bit different, and I'm not the lawyer nor the accountant, but a cryptocurrency is treated as a currency here and not an asset. So it's basically on par with like a US dollar or euro. And because of the regulations, you know, individuals can have cryptocurrency exchange accounts, companies can as well. We can pay invoices, receive payment for invoices, pay our staff in cryptocurrency. The challenge though is the last mile, right? Like, I think JJ mentioned, or maybe it was Matthew mentioned, like a hardware wallet. What is a hardware wallet, and how do we educate people about that, right? And as a kind of a deep into blockchain company, maybe it's a little bit easier for us, but there's still that last mile component to overcome, to teach people that that account address that I showed, that's the public one. There's a private key, an extremely long password that accompanies that you have to keep absolutely secret at all times, right? And it's sort of with the power of everything we can do with it, there comes responsibility, and that's where these intermediaries come in. Either in the sense of to JJ's example around kind of brokering our personal data, and that being a very powerful use case, or even a cryptocurrency exchange, which acts as an intermediary to hold it for us. So there's still, I would say, work to do in that space. The challenge in the challenge with actually paying people is not that we can't do it legally. It's that like the accounting software doesn't handle it yet, or the other software that we may use to pay our employees doesn't handle it. So it becomes a much more manual process. Bitflyer, the cryptocurrency exchange, may be paying its staff, but they don't offer a service for other companies to pay their staff yet, because they just haven't built that. Maybe, because there's not demand, or there's other priorities, right? And it's similarly in the retail space. Like, there's always the promise that you'd be able to go into a store and, use cryptocurrency. I think that that kind of hasn't materialized on a broad scale. There's a very big electronic store chain in Japan, BIC camera, where you can use cryptocurrency to buy items here, but there aren't many others. There aren't many others yet, and I think that the challenges are twofold. Number one, that last mile infrastructure, because now you have to train the store staff, and the stores have to be incentivized to use it. And number two, I think that we've seen a massive uptake in other digital payment options, and almost too many of them. You walk, I'm not sure how it is in the Philippines, but you walk into a store in Japan and you've got 20 different options, from Android Pay, Google Pay, to various QR code schemes, or tap to pay, RFID schemes, either from, ones that work internationally like Visa, or ones that are homegrown like Suica or Passmo. And so it's almost, there's too much choice. I wouldn't say that they're necessarily better than cryptocurrency, but I think that we have, we're not quite there yet with the last mile. And so, it's where we have seen the uptake is in investment, and in NFTs, and in decentralized finance, central bank digital currencies, things like that. We haven't yet seen it for last mile retail, and I think that that's still not quite there yet.
Thank you very much. We are going to arrive close to the end of the discussion, but we as we said, we will have a Q&A for 15 minutes. So if you have any question, please feel free to ask them. I saw there was a question regarding do we need another financial crisis to have blockchain and cryptocurrency adoption by the general public and business? Jonathan, I will think it's a question maybe you can try to answer.
I think, I mean, on a personal basis, I don't think we need the magnitude of financial crisis to instigate adoption, right, in the general public for blockchain or cryptocurrencies. It's more of the problems that we are facing collectively in today's world, whether it be in our business or in our daily life, or we're trying to solve a problem by building certain companies. So how we can use such emerging technologies to solve these problems and have a greater peace of mind in our business or our daily life, I think that is ultimately the instigator for us to spur adoption in blockchain.
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah. It just occurred to me. I just want to sort of provide
Go ahead.
something that I think, I've been listening to Charles Hoskins of Cardano recently, and he was talking about using crypto, particularly his platform, of course, Cardano, in Africa to provide finance, and we're talking about decentralized finance, right? So you have an individual, say in Europe, where interest rates are at negative interest rates, and so they figure they want to lend their money. They turn their money into crypto. They invest it in a say a lending pool, right? A liquidity pool or a lending platform. And in the Philippines, the interest rates are quite high. In fact, if you're poor in the Philippines, you're probably paying interest at, say, what at a pawn shop, I think about 3.5–4% per month, right? That's the rate. So there's arbitrage there, right? So imagine DeFi, right? Decentralized finance. That guy in Europe invests his crypto. He's willing to receive 1%, right? Some guy in the Philippines takes that 1% and then competes against people who lend money, right? So you can drive the interest rates down and make say finance more accessible to Filipinos. So this is one way in which sort of DeFi sort of equalizing the global market and allowing sort of assets to cross borders and provide sort of better value to a consumer. I think is one way to sort of use crypto to sort of solve the problems of poverty.
Yeah, you're correct, but what's the impact regarding like foreigner investments? Because I know some country can be like, they need to control these kind of things for money laundering and all these kind of things who can be used for this. So there is some impact who need to be checked. So what's your view on this, JJ?
So I think what's going to happen. So that's a legitimate point, right? You don't want dirty money coming in, but but on the other hand, I think it's going to be a question of at what point, again, right? At what point does that crypto hit the market? So if I were to do this business, let's say, okay, so I'll look for a country that doesn't care that much about, say, less about money laundering, meaning they're more lax or they're more accommodating, less strict about turning crypto into cash. I turn it into cash in that jurisdiction. I then have this deposit in that jurisdiction. Let's say Hong Kong. So I have $1 million in Hong Kong. What I do is I borrow from HSBC in the Philippines, and then I use the Hong Kong deposit which is an HSBC bank, right? I use that as collateral. So it's actually in the Philippines it looks like a clean loan, but it's actually it's a holdout agreement. And so what happens now is I'm able to enter. The money is now able to enter technically. And my cost is just the 1% plus the whatever interest rate HSBC charges me on the local loan. And so I'm still able to sort of provide liquidity and sort of drive that price down. So what I'm hoping is that people are going to be creative in these ways. And what I also hope that the BSP might be more accommodating in their AML regulations. One of the things that we've seen from the fintechs in the Philippines is that they are all compliance driven. They all want to comply with the regulation. So if the regulator says do this, they will do it. And I think that the regulator here, they're very concerned about financial inclusion. They're very concerned about getting financial services out to the edges and driving price down. They want competition in the market. They want to drive the price down. I kind of look at it as they're sort of nudging along our big banks who are sort of going at a glacial pace in terms of innovating. They're sort of nudging them along and saying, look, if you don't innovate, we're going to let these fintechs come in. They're going to eat your lunch, right? So I kind of like the regulator, and they're doing it in a nice way. They're sort of nudging them along and sort of encouraging them to innovate.
We had a chance late last year to speak with two different central banks about central bank digital currencies, and this is, I think, kind of the other thing that kind of the unexpected thing almost that I think has come about in the last year. Now a central bank digital currency is essentially a central bank issuing currency on a blockchain. And again, we're talking about blockchain as a technology or a tool as a platform to do that. So we have paper money today. We have traditional electronic money, which is the money in our bank accounts. I mean, you spoke about JJ about the HSBC here and there, right? Loans across 2 different countries. There's no physical money being put on a boat or a plane. It's all just numbers in a bank account. That's electronic money. Yes. So blockchain is a platform for basically issuing a central bank digital currency, which means if you run your own blockchain, you set all of the rules. right? In terms of supply and demand, allow list, deny list, or blacklist, whitelist, who has access to that money. But the advantage at the edges is that the incremental cost is very, very low, because you cut out all of these intermediaries that are basically providing services, but it's really back office services. It's not adding value like a fintech startup might be around financial inclusion, or adding value on top of the base monetary system. And I think that central bank digital currencies really came about over the past year, really came to popularity first when China basically said, hey, we're doing it. And that was on the heels of Libra, if anybody's heard of it. That was actually Facebook backed, a kind of semi-decentralized cryptocurrency, which there was a lot of fanfare for, and then a lot of concern about. And then China came out and said, well, actually, we're basically going to do a central bank digital currency that looks like this. And now you have every country in the world is sort of really looking at this quite seriously, because just like the US dollar being essentially the de facto reserve currency of the world, 100 years ago it was the British pound. What will it be in another 20 years? And will a shift to blockchain or cryptocurrency potentially, and fintech and financial inclusion, potentially shift that balance as well? So I think that progressive progressive regulators like the Philippines, and I think Japan as well, are looking at this as an opportunity, and as well as to keep ahead of the threat of, if we don't move fast enough, then other people will.
Yeah, but we can see also some issue regarding like blockchain at the moment. We have a question regarding difficulty and how there is latency or scalability or fees going higher. So what kind of solution is happening for this? Jonathan, maybe you can answer this question if you want.
In terms of latency and scale, I think blockchain is improving as we speak, right? And there are, for example, if blockchain is on Ethereum, to mine it, you need gas fees, for example. And it can take certain times and the time differs basically to mine a block and to hash them. It will be different for various kinds of blockchains. So that is improving as we speak, and there are still specific challenges that we need to address. I think predominantly we need to look at what is the blockchain is serving a specific purpose for, right? And you brought up one of the case just now is about AML KYC. There are certain blockchain that allows you to transact funds and shares and purchase cryptocurrencies and make payments in a complete anonymity perspective, like Monero, for example, right? And there are certain blockchains that you will need to basically identify who is the sender and so on. And the government is more interested from this perspective, right? That you are able to monitor where's the funds going to, so that we can ensure there's no terrorist financing, or is it being used in the black market, and so on and so forth. So there are multiple aspects, I think, that will need to be considered when we consider in terms of scalability as well as latency. And one direct impact is also in terms of interoperability with different kinds of blockchain. In order to scale, I think then blockchain will need to interoperate, whether it's cross-chain, whether it is, because there are a lot of startups that are building individual blockchain, and they're trying to get others to adopt their infrastructure. So, but they will definitely face a point of time, the challenges of how do they then exchange these data or information on a different kind of blockchain, right? If more often than not, an enterprise, they're using Hyperledger Fabric, for example, as well as Corda. Yeah.
Okay. We have one more question, and we have 5 minutes left. So if you have like any question, please rush into it. The question we have is, given its multiple pitfall, will we see an alternative to proof of work anytime soon? I think this will be good for Jeff. And Jeff, can you explain quickly what proof of work is about?
Yeah, sure. Proof of work. So when the pseudonymous Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever they may be, invented Bitcoin more than 10 years ago, Really what they were doing was combining a series of existing technologies in a very novel way, and to kind of, you know, start the engine of blockchain. And Bitcoin is confusing because it refers both to the cryptocurrency as well as the blockchain that runs underneath it. The Bitcoin blockchain and most other public blockchains, there is a requirement to basically incentivize the participants in the blockchain to keep it secure. And in order to incentivize them, there's a few things, right? The first is there's an economic aspect, economic incentivization, so paying the money, and that is through paying the miners, the people that are securing this system, Bitcoin. And that happens by basically increasing the monetary supply by a small amount on every, you know, as transactions are added to the blockchain into blocks, right? And in order to basically, you know, so that's the incentivization. The disincentivization to not do the bad thing is that essentially, in order to gain the right to create a block on the blockchain, you have to do a lot of work. And work in this case means solve a really hard mathematical problem that continues to get adjusted to be more and more difficult the more people that are participating in the blockchain. And the way that you essentially what you're doing by solving a very hard mathematical problem is you're spending your computer processor or CPU cycles. And it's not just a single one, it's many, I mean, tens of thousands or millions and millions. So you invest all this money in these CPUs, right, in these computers, and you invest all this money in electricity to run all of them, which is the big commodity. And if you are doing good work to secure the blockchain, statistically, you will be getting a little bit of more money over time, and it will pay for your investment. If you try to hack the blockchain, essentially you will lose that money. You will not get that money, but you'll be out all of the money you spent on the electricity and the computers. And that's kind of the whole scheme. So that's proof of work. The disadvantage is it uses a lot of electricity. So unless you are sitting right next to a very large solar farm or a huge, hydroelectric turbine or a wind turbine plant, I mean, a really large one, you know, you're burning fossil fuels. And so the idea is that we're going to move from proof of work to something called proof of stake. And so I described some of the pitfalls. That was part of the question. Proof of stake is essentially saying, you know what, we're not going to rely on people solving a difficult mathematical problem. We have enough people that are invested in this already that essentially they will put up a bond in the form of the cryptocurrency that they hold for the right to add new transactions to the network. And as long as they're doing that correctly, that their computers are available and that they're adding transactions correctly, everybody else will vote to give them their small share each time, and to allow them to keep their stake, which they can withdraw at any point in time. If they do something bad, they will lose their stake. The two advantages to this are, number one, it's much faster. We can create transactions much faster, much more efficiently. Number two, it doesn't use really no more electricity than it does to run your computer. So basically nothing, right? The challenge is it's very hard to get right. There's many different corner cases to consider, and that's essentially since Ethereum blockchain started, I guess 6 years ago, the idea has always been this is what we're going to move to. We're still a few years off from it because it's taking that long to get the research, to complete the research and development to do it right. So that's kind of the pitfalls of what proof of work is, its pitfalls, and proof of stake is what everybody's moving to.
Thank you, Jeff. I think we've run out of time, so we are going to wrap up.
Wait, can I just read a question? Well, there's a
please.
comment here from one of our members, Rodora Garcia. It's a comment more than a question, and maybe JJ can elaborate on this. She says the US IRS treats cryptocurrency as property, and maybe Philippine tax administration will consider that also. However, the actual practice of accountants has shown that more often than not, these transactions fall into financial assets. Either way, government taxation here has no regulation established on how this will be booked on the financial statements. It's just a comment. So I'm not sure if JJ, you'd be in a position to say something about this.
No, I mean, I agree with that. As I read that, I was going to reply to her. It's a good observation. I think that the the BI, the local taxing authority, at some point is going to take a position on this. What I'm hoping is that it's something that will be reasonable. But I believe the trend now is for the tax rates to go down. I believe the Department of Finance is now moving to. We have to match the global tax rate. So the US is going down, so I think we're going down as well. So hopefully by the time this all shakes out and there's clarity, the tax rate will be something that will be reasonable, which I hope would happen, because I would rather see the Filipinos who earn that money, liquidate their earnings here and keep it in country rather than keep them offshore.
Great. I think with that, we're going to close. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Just a note to everyone who's watched, if you want to see the presentation again, it'll be up on our YouTube site and our YouTube channel under Manila House Private Club in a day or so. Probably by tomorrow, it should be up. So you can review the talk again. And if you want to pay more attention to the presentations, I think I personally would need to see them up close and study them all over again. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Asia Society, for partnering with us. And thank you, Kenja at Curvegrid and Kobeibrc, Matthew, Jonathan, Jeff, and JJ for joining us today. Thank you, Clifford of Kenja, for making this happen. And if you want to join us on the 23rd, we have another webinar at 11 a.m. about travel, women in travel as part of our Women's Month offerings. So we have 3 boutique travel experts who will talk about their experiences, especially during the pandemic. And that's it. So that's a wrap. And thank you so much for joining us on behalf of Manila House Private Club. I'd like to thank you all for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you.